Her newborn lungs had never produced a sound until the moment rough Apache hands lifted her from certain death in the Arizona dust, abandoned by white settlers who believed her silence was a curse. The piercing wail that finally escaped her tiny body sealed a bond between two worlds that would save thousands of lives across the blood-soaked frontier. Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and comment where in the world you're watching from. Let's go. The merciless summer sun beat down upon the Arizona territory, scorching the earth and drawing every last drop of moisture from the cracked soil. Dust devils spun across the barren landscape, their dance a reminder of nature's indifference to human suffering. Alongside a rarely traveled trail that cut through the foothills, a small bundle lay wrapped in thin cotton cloth, nearly invisible against the sun-bleached ground. Rebecca Thornhill clutched her husband's arm as they walked away, tears streaming down her dirt-streaked face. William's jaw was set like stone, his eyes fixed firmly on the horizon before them, refusing to look back at what they were leaving behind. "We can't, William," Rebecca whispered, her voice cracking with each step that took them farther from the bundle. "She's our flesh and blood." William's grip tightened on the reins of their exhausted mare as he pulled his wife forward. No child of God stays silent like that, not even when she came into this world. No cries, no tears, nothing. It ain't natural, Rebecca. The others are watching us, talking, saying she's touched. We can't feed a mouth that'll never be right. Rebecca stifled a sob. "But to leave her here—" "The Lord will decide," William said firmly. "If he means for her to live, he'll send someone to find her." The bundle, their newborn daughter, lay silent as her parents disappeared into the shimmering heat waves. She had been an oddity from the moment of her birth 3 days prior, while the other infants in their struggling settlement wailed with the first breath of life. This child had simply opened her eyes and regarded the world with an unsettling stillness. The midwife had crossed herself, muttering about changelings and cursed children. In a community fighting daily against starvation and hostile elements, such whispers spread quickly. For 2 days and nights, the child remained beneath the brutal sun and the cold, star-filled sky. No coyotes approached, no vultures circled. It was as if even nature's scavengers sensed something different about this abandoned life. On the morning of the 3rd day, hoofbeats disturbed the silence. Standing Bear, a warrior of the Chiricahua Apache, followed a trail of wild horses that had watered at a nearby spring. At 35 winters, his face was etched with the lines of a man who had seen too much suffering. 3 summers passed, U.S. Cavalry had raided his camp while he hunted in the mountains. He returned to find his wife and 2 children among the slain. Since then, he had lived apart from his people, taking solace only in tracking and the quiet communion with the desert spirits. The horses had led him here, but now he slowed his mount, sensing something unusual. A flicker of white against the dull brown landscape caught his eye. Standing Bear dismounted, approaching cautiously. When he pulled back the cloth, he found himself looking into the clear, alert eyes of an infant girl. She regarded him without fear, her tiny fingers reaching up toward his weather-worn face. "Shisnju," he whispered in his native tongue. "Little one." As if responding to his words, the child's face contorted, and for the first time in her brief life, she let out a strong, healthy cry. The sound pierced the desert stillness, startling a nearby jackrabbit into flight. Standing Bear felt something shift within his chest, a door, long closed, creaking open. In his tradition, such a sign could not be ignored. This child had been silent for the white settlers who abandoned her, but found her voice for him. The spirits had guided his path to hers. With gentle hands, he lifted the infant, cradling her against his chest. "The morning brings you silence, and silence brings you to me," he said softly. "Morning silence, that shall be your name." Mounting his horse with practiced ease despite his precious burden, Standing Bear turned away from the trail the settlers had taken. He would bring this child to his people. She would become a daughter of the Apache. The journey back to the Apache encampment wound through canyons where shadows offered brief respite from the punishing heat. Standing Bear had fashioned a sling from his leather vest, creating a secure cradle for morning silence against his chest. The child drifted between sleep and quiet alertness, her tiny fingers occasionally clutching at the bone pendant that hung from his neck. "You hold strong for one so small," he murmured, offering her a dampened cloth to suck for moisture. "The spirits chose well when they placed you in my path." As dusk painted the western sky in hues of crimson and gold, Standing Bear reached the hidden valley where a small band of his people had established a temporary home, far from the cavalry patrols and settler routes. Smoke from cooking fires rose in thin columns above the scattered teepees, and children's laughter echoed against the stone walls that protected them. Swift Deer, an elder whose wisdom was respected even by rival tribes, was the first to spot his approach. Her eyes narrowed at the bundle secured to his chest. "Standing Bear returns with strange cargo," she called out, causing others to emerge from their dwellings. Lone Wolf, once Standing Bear's closest friend before grief had driven them apart, stepped forward with a spear held loosely in his hand. "What do you bring to our camp, brother? You who chose solitude over your people's company." Standing Bear dismounted carefully, one hand protectively cradling morning silence. "I bring one who was abandoned, one who was waiting for me." A circle formed around him as he unwrapped the child from her makeshift sling. Whispers rippled through the gathering. Some faces showed compassion, others suspicion. A white child? Singing Bird, a young mother, pushed forward to look more closely. The settlers discard their own now. Standing Bear met her gaze steadily. She was left to die in the sun. 2 days, maybe more. No water, no shelter. "And yet she lives," Swift Deer observed, her ancient fingers gently touching the infant's forehead. "She is strong." "She was silent until I found her," Standing Bear explained. "Then she cried out as if she had been waiting. The spirits guided me to her." Lone Wolf's expression darkened. "Or they guided you into a trap. The white soldiers use many tricks to find our camps, even their own children." "She is no trap," Standing Bear replied, his voice low but firm. "She is a gift, Morning Silence I have named her." Swift Deer's weathered face creased in a rare smile. "A good name. But bringing her here means you return to us as well? No more wandering alone with your grief?" The question hung in the air, weighted with all that had remained unsaid since Standing Bear had withdrawn from his people. The loss of his family had carved a hollow space within him that none had been able to reach. "I return," he said simply. That night, as the camp settled into slumber, Standing Bear sat before a small fire outside the teepee that Swift Deer had insisted he reclaim. Morning Silence lay beside him on a bed of soft rabbit furs, her tiny chest rising and falling in peaceful sleep. Running Fox, the band's young healer, approached with a bowl of herb-infused milk. "For the child," she said, her voice melodic in the night stillness. "Goat's milk with herbs to strengthen her blood." Standing Bear nodded in thanks. "You do not question my decision to bring her here?" Running Fox sat beside him, her movements fluid and graceful. "The Great Spirit works in ways we cannot always understand. This child found her voice when you found her. That is medicine powerful enough for me." She demonstrated how to feed the infant, tipping small amounts of the milk into the child's eager mouth. Standing Bear watched, mesmerized by the simple act of nurturing. "She will need more than I know how to give," he admitted. Running Fox's dark eyes reflected the firelight. "Then you will learn, as all parents must. And you are not alone anymore, Standing Bear. You have returned to your people." As if understanding their conversation, Morning Silence's hand reached up, grasping Standing Bear's finger with surprising strength. "See?" Running Fox smiled. "She claims you already." Later, as the camp fell silent under a blanket of stars, Standing Bear sang softly to the child, an ancient lullaby his own mother had once sung to him. For the first time since losing his family, the weight of grief seemed to lighten, making space for something new to grow in its place. "Sleep now, Morning Silence," he whispered. "Tomorrow, your new life begins." 5 summers passed like wind through canyon walls, each season leaving its mark on both Standing Bear and the child he had claimed as his daughter. Morning Silence grew from a fragile infant into a sturdy, quick-footed girl with sun-lightened hair that fell in waves to her shoulders and eyes that seemed to absorb rather than merely see the world around her. The camp had moved 3 times since her arrival, following ancient patterns of seasonal migration, always staying one step ahead of the blue-coat soldiers and their relentless expansion. With each move, Morning Silence adapted like a young sapling bending with the wind, her roots growing deeper into Apache soil, even as her appearance marked her as different. Standing Bear watched her now, crouched by the stream that bordered their current encampment, her small hands cupped to catch minnows that darted through the clear water. Nearby, 3 Apache children of similar age played the same game, their laughter mingling in the afternoon warmth. "She learns quickly," Swift Deer observed, appearing beside him with the silent grace that belied her advanced years. "Faster than many born to our ways." Standing Bear nodded, pride warming his chest. "She listens with more than her ears." This was true in ways that had begun to draw notice throughout the band. Morning Silence rarely spoke. When she did, her words came in a mixture of Apache and the English she had somehow retained from before her abandonment. But her silence was not emptiness. It was attention, deep and unwavering. "The other children no longer keep distance," Standing Bear remarked, watching as Yellowbird, a girl who had once been wary of the pale newcomer, now shared her successful catch with Morning Silence. Swift Deer made a sound of agreement. "Children see truth before adults. They know she belongs." She paused, her ancient eyes narrowing slightly. "But not all adults share this wisdom." Standing Bear did not need to ask whom she meant, though most of the band had accepted Morning Silence, particularly after she had survived a fever that took 2 other children during their second winter together. Lone Wolf remained distant, watchful. His warnings about bringing a white child into their midst had softened, but never fully disappeared. "He fears what he cannot understand," Standing Bear replied. "Perhaps," Swift Deer said, "or perhaps he sees what is coming more clearly than others." Before Standing Bear could question her meaning, Morning Silence broke away from the children's play and ran toward them, her bare feet barely disturbing the earth. In her hands, she clutched something small. "Father," she said, the Apache word flowing naturally from her lips. She opened her palms to reveal a small bird with a broken wing, its tiny chest heaving with rapid breaths. "It fell from there." She pointed to a cottonwood tree at the stream's edge. Standing Bear knelt to examine the injured creature. "Its wing is badly damaged. Nature must sometimes take its course, little one." Morning Silence shook her head firmly. "I can help it." There was no childish pleading in her voice, only certainty. Swift Deer and Standing Bear exchanged glances. The old woman nodded almost imperceptibly, her eyes showing interest rather than dismissal. "Show me how you would help, child," Swift Deer said gently. With careful movements that seemed beyond her years, Morning Silence cradled the bird in one hand, while the other hovered just above its injured wing. She closed her eyes, her face taking on an expression of intense concentration. Standing Bear watched, puzzled, as minutes stretched in silence. The bird's frantic movements gradually calmed. When Morning Silence finally opened her eyes, there was an unusual brightness to them, as if reflecting an inner light. "It needs quiet and darkness," she stated simply. 3 days, then it will fly again." Swift Deer's breath caught audibly. "Who taught you this?" Morning Silence looked genuinely confused by the question. "No one. I listened to what it needed." That evening, as the camp settled around cooking fires, Running Fox approached Standing Bear's teepee, her expression troubled. "The child," she said without preamble. "What she did with the bird, there is talk." Standing Bear continued stringing a new bow, his hands steady. "What kind of talk?" "Some say she has strong medicine. Others say it is white magic, not of our ways." Running Fox hesitated. "Lone Wolf speaks the loudest." "And what do you say?" Standing Bear asked, meeting her gaze directly. Running Fox's eyes softened. "I say gift is gift, no matter the vessel." But Standing Bear, her voice lowered. There was something in how she touched that bird, something I have seen only in the oldest healers of our people. She is 5 summers old, yet she heals with the wisdom of elders. Standing Bear set aside his work and gestured toward the small, sleeping form in the corner of the teepee. Morning Silence lay curled beneath a rabbit fur blanket, the injured bird nested in a small basket near her head. "When I found her," he said quietly, "she had not cried since her birth. She found her voice only when our paths crossed. Perhaps the Great Spirit had purpose in this." Running Fox nodded slowly. "Watch her closely, Standing Bear. A gift can become a burden if not properly guided." After she left, Standing Bear remained awake long into the night, watching his daughter's peaceful sleep and wondering what path the spirits had chosen for her and what price such gifts might someday demand. 7 more summers passed, each one etching its story deeper into the land and its people. Morning Silence had grown into a slender girl of 12, her pale skin bronzed by the Arizona sun, her movements bearing the fluid grace of the Apache. Her hair, once the color of wheat, had darkened to honey gold, often braided with beads and feathers in the Apache tradition. Only her eyes, a clear, startling blue, betrayed her origins. The band had settled near the base of the Ghost Mountains, in a hidden valley where several springs provided reliable water even in the driest months. Their temporary settlement had gradually become more permanent as the years passed without discovery by the Bluecoats. Gardens flourished beside the springs, and stone-ringed fire pits marked the center of what was becoming a true village. Standing Bear watched with quiet pride as Morning Silence emerged from the healing lodge, wiping her hands on a cloth. Inside, Running Fox's youngest son had been fighting a fever for 3 days. The concern that had creased Standing Bear's brow earlier now eased as he recognized the calm certainty in his daughter's movements. "The fever breaks," Morning Silence announced, her voice soft but firm. She spoke perfect Apache now, though she also knew English from the stories Standing Bear had insisted she learn. Knowledge of the enemy's tongue, he believed, might someday save her life. "You are sure?" Running Fox appeared in the lodge doorway, exhaustion evident in the slump of her shoulders. Morning Silence nodded once. "By morning, he will ask for food. Give him pine needle tea until midday, then broth. His strength will return by the next full moon." Running Fox studied the girl's face, then nodded with acceptance born of years witnessing Morning Silence's uncanny abilities. "You have not slept in 2 days. Rest now." As Morning Silence approached, Standing Bear felt the familiar swell of contradictory emotions, pride in what she had become, fear for what her gifts might cost her. At 12, she had already earned a place among the healers that few achieved in a lifetime. Her hands seemed to know what ailed a body before symptoms fully revealed themselves. Her quiet presence brought comfort, even when medicines could not cure. "You did well," he said simply as she reached him. A rare smile briefly lit her solemn features. The fever fought hard, but Little Hawk is stronger. Together they walked toward their dwelling, one of the larger structures in the camp due to Standing Bear's status as both warrior and council member. The interior was divided by hanging hides, creating a separate space where Morning Silence could treat those who sought her help. "There is news," Standing Bear said as they sat before the small cookfire. "Riders came while you were with Little Hawk." Morning Silence looked up sharply, instantly alert. Riders meant information from other bands, and information often meant trouble. "The white settlement near Thunder Creek has grown. They have built a fort." He kept his voice neutral, though the implications were clear. "Soldiers patrol farther into our hunting grounds each moon." "How long before they find us?" she asked, the pragmatic question of someone far older than her 12 summers. "That depends on how carefully we move from now on. The council meets tonight to decide." Morning Silence nodded, her expression thoughtful. "I should gather more medicines, the ones that travel well." Standing Bear felt a familiar ache. Most children her age thought of games and small adventures. Morning Silence thought of preparations and responsibilities. Sometimes he wondered if he had burdened her too soon with the knowledge of their precarious existence. "There is something else," he added, hesitation evident in his tone. "Lone Wolf spoke against you at the last council." Her face remained impassive, but Standing Bear saw the slight stiffening of her shoulders. "What did he say?" "That your healing comes from white magic, that it may bring attention from their shamans and priests." Standing Bear's jaw tightened. "He suggested you be kept from treating anyone but our own band." Morning Silence absorbed this without visible reaction, though her fingers worked methodically at stripping a bundle of sage beside her. "And the council's response?" "Swift Deer spoke strongly in your defense. She reminded them of the Blackfoot warriors you healed last winter, how they spread word of the Apache healer and now give our hunters safe passage through their territories." He paused. "For now, the council has decided you may continue as before." "For now," she repeated quietly. Later that evening, as Standing Bear attended the council meeting, Morning Silence slipped out to the edge of the camp. A small rise overlooked the valley below, and from there, on the clearest nights, one could see the distant flicker of lights from the white settlement, impossibly far, yet somehow drawing ever closer with each passing season. She was not alone in her vigil. Running Fox's eldest daughter, River Song, joined her silently, sitting cross-legged on the rocky ground. "Is it true?" River Song asked after several minutes of companionable silence. "Lone Wolf wishes to restrict your healing?" Morning Silence nodded, her gaze still fixed on the horizon. "He fears what he doesn't understand." River Song, 2 summers older than Morning Silence and her closest friend, snorted softly. "He fears you grow more respected than him. 3 bands have sent injured warriors to you this season alone." "It isn't about respect," Morning Silence replied, finally turning to her friend. "It's about belonging. In his eyes, I will always be Inda, the enemy. And yet you healed his sister's son last winter." Morning Silence shrugged slightly. "Healing doesn't choose sides." They sat in silence as darkness fully claimed the land, the stars emerging like scattered embers across the vast sky. Finally, River Song spoke again, her voice barely above a whisper. "The traders who came through last moon spoke of a sickness in the white settlements. They say many die, especially the children." Morning Silence felt something twist inside her chest, a calling she had learned to recognize but not always understand. "What kind of sickness?" "Red spots that burn like fire, breath that rattles like stones in a gourd, River Song shuddered. They say it spreads like wind through dry grass. Morning Silence closed her eyes, her hands unconsciously forming the shapes they made when sensing illness. In the darkness behind her eyelids, she saw flashes of red, heard the labored breathing of countless sufferers. When she opened her eyes, River Song was watching her with an expression of mingled awe and concern. "You want to help them, don't you?" her friend asked, "even though they would kill us without hesitation." Morning Silence looked back toward the distant, invisible settlement. "Pain speaks the same language in every body," she said softly. "Suffering doesn't know the difference between red skin and white." The sickness came first to the Apache camp, like a silent predator, stealing breath before anyone recognized its presence. Little Hawk, not fully recovered from his fever, was the first to show the angry red spots that River Song had described. By nightfall, 3 more children lay burning with the same affliction, their small bodies struggling against an enemy no warrior could fight with conventional weapons. The camp erupted in fear. Mothers clutched healthy children close. Warriors posted extra guards as if invisible spirits might be warded off with arrows, and elders gathered in urgent council. Standing Bear found Morning Silence already at work in the healing lodge, her hands moving with practiced precision as she prepared poultices and tinctures. "You knew this would come," he said, not a question but a realization. She nodded without looking up from the mortar where she ground dried herbs to fine powder. "I felt it approaching, like storm clouds gathering on the horizon of my thoughts. Can you stop it?" Her hands paused momentarily. "I can ease suffering. I can help some bodies fight it. But this sickness..." She finally looked up, her blue eyes shadowed with knowledge beyond her years. "It is strong, Father, and it is hungry." Within 3 days, 20 members of the band showed symptoms. The healing lodge could no longer contain all who needed care, so the sick were kept in their family dwellings, with Morning Silence moving between them. She slept only in brief snatches, her young face growing gaunt with exhaustion. Running Fox worked alongside her, learning the treatments Morning Silence devised: steam tents infused with pine and cedar to ease breathing, cool compresses of specific herbs to draw out fever, teas brewed from roots that strengthened the body's fight against invasion. On the 4th night, as Morning Silence knelt beside 2 feathers, an elder whose breathing had grown dangerously shallow, Lone Wolf entered the dwelling. His normally proud stance was bent with worry. His own son had fallen ill that morning. "The council wishes to speak with you," he said, his voice stripped of its usual hostility by fear. Morning Silence placed a cool cloth on 2 feathers' forehead. "I cannot leave him now. He walks between worlds. The council cannot come here. The matter concerns all our people." Lone Wolf's eyes revealed the struggle within him, a lifetime of suspicion warring with desperate need. "My son burns like fire. The others you have treated show improvement. We need your help." The simple admission seemed to cost him greatly. Morning Silence studied him for a moment, then nodded. "I will come when 2 feathers is stable. Send River Song to sit with him." At the council fire, the mood was somber. Elders, whose faces normally revealed nothing, now showed naked fear. Swift Deer, looking frailer than Morning Silence had ever seen her, spoke first. "The traders have returned. The sickness ravages the white settlement worse than here. Their healer is overwhelmed. Many children have died." Morning Silence absorbed this without visible reaction, though her heart quickened at the confirmation of what she had sensed. "They seek your help," Swift Deer continued. "They have heard of the Apache healer with pale skin who works miracles. They offer safe passage, protection, and gifts in exchange for your assistance." A murmur rippled through the council. Standing Bear's face remained impassive, but Morning Silence could read the tension in the set of his shoulders. "It is a trap," one of the warriors declared. "They seek to capture her, nothing more." "Perhaps," Swift Deer acknowledged. Yet the trader who brought this message has dealt fairly with us for many seasons. He swore on his gods that the offer is genuine. Even if it is, Lone Wolf interjected, his voice strained, our own people suffer. Would you send our only hope to save those who would slaughter us if they found our camp? Morning. Silence listened as the debate continued, arguments flowing back and forth like a turbulent stream. Finally, when a moment of silence fell, she spoke, I will go. The simple declaration silenced everyone. Standing Bear's eyes met hers, his expression unreadable. I will go, she repeated, but not because they ask it, because the sickness does not care about the color of skin or the language of prayers. It kills without distinction, and so I must heal without distinction. You are a child, one of the elders protested. 13 summers is not enough to make such a choice. Morning. Silence straightened, and in that moment she seemed to grow taller than her physical form. I was a child when I was abandoned to die. I was a child when Standing Bear found me. I was a child when I healed my first bird with a broken wing. But in this, I am not a child. I am what the spirits have made me. Swift Deer nodded slowly, approval warming her ancient eyes. She speaks with the voice of a healer. Such wisdom cannot be measured in summers. If you go, you risk everything, Lone Wolf argued, desperation edging his voice. Our location, our safety, your own freedom. If I do not go, Morning Silence countered quietly, I risk something greater. The gift I was given is not mine alone. It belongs to all who suffer. Standing Bear finally broke his silence. I will accompany her, with 4 warriors for protection. We will meet the whites at Broken Rock, far from our camp. If there is treachery, we will know it before we are vulnerable. The council erupted again in debate, but Morning Silence knew the decision was already made. As the argument swirled around her, she felt a strange calmness settle in her center, the same stillness she found when healing the most grievously injured. This was her path, revealed at last with unmistakable clarity. Later, as she prepared her medicines for the journey, Riversong helped in worried silence. You trust too easily, her friend finally said. These are the same people who threw you away as an infant. Morning Silence carefully wrapped dried herbs in deerskin. I do not trust them. I trust this. She placed her hand over her heart. The path that was shown to me before I had words to understand it. Riversong's eyes filled with tears. What if you never return? Morning. Silence looked up, her blue eyes reflecting the firelight. If that is to be my journey, then it will have meaning. But I believe I will return. She reached for her friend's hand. When I was abandoned, death seemed certain. Yet Standing Bear found me. Sometimes what looks like an ending is merely a turn in the path. As dawn broke the next morning, Morning Silence mounted the pony Standing Bear had prepared for her. Strapped to its sides were her medicines and healing tools. 4 warriors, including Lone Wolf, who had insisted on joining them despite his son's illness, flanked her and Standing Bear. The band gathered to witness their departure, faces solemn in the pink light of early morning. Swift Deer approached, her gnarled hands extending a small pouch. Protection, she said simply, hanging it around Morning Silence's neck, and a reminder of who you are, child of 2 worlds, belonging fully to both. Morning Silence touched the pouch reverently, feeling the power of the Elder's blessing flow through it. Then, with a final look at the only home she had ever known, she urged her pony forward into the uncertain future that awaited her beyond the boundaries of the Apache world. The journey to Broken Rock took most of the day, their path winding through narrow canyons and across sun-scorched plateaus. Morning Silence rode in silence, absorbing the changing landscape as they moved farther from Apache territory. Standing Bear maintained a watchful vigilance, his eyes constantly scanning the horizon for signs of danger. Lone Wolf rode at the rear of their small party, his usual proud posture diminished by worry for his son left behind. By mid-afternoon, they reached the agreed meeting place, a distinctive formation where weather-beaten boulders balanced precariously atop one another, creating a natural landmark visible for miles. No white representatives had arrived yet. "We wait here," Standing Bear instructed, selecting a position that offered both shade and clear sightlines in all directions. "Touch nothing they offer until I have examined it." Morning. Silence nodded, understanding the caution. Though she had never directly encountered white settlers since being found as an infant, she had absorbed years of stories about their treachery, poisoned gifts, broken promises, sudden violence. As the sun began its descent toward the western horizon, dust clouds announced approaching riders. Standing Bear signaled the warriors to defensive positions, while he and Morning Silence remained visible. 3 men approached on horseback, 2 with rifles held across their saddles, and a third, older man, who rode slightly ahead. His clothing was different from the others, a black coat despite the heat, and a white collar that encircled his neck like a band of bone. "The one in black is their medicine man," Standing Bear murmured. "A priest, they call them." The white men halted a respectful distance away. The priest raised his empty hands in the universal gesture of peace before speaking. "I am Father Thomas Blackwood of the St. Mary's Mission at Copper Springs," he called out in clear, careful Spanish, obviously hoping the Apache might understand some of it. "We come in peace, seeking the healer." Standing Bear responded in the same language, his accent thick but words intelligible. "Why should we trust you with our healer?" Father Blackwood's eyes widened slightly at receiving a response in Spanish, then shifted to Morning Silence with undisguised curiosity. Even at this distance, her appearance must have been striking. Apache dress and bearing combined with her fair skin and blue eyes. 27 people have died in our settlement," the priest replied, his voice grave. 16 of them children. Our doctor is ill himself now. We have medicines, but not the knowledge to use them effectively against this sickness." He hesitated. "We offer payment, protection, and safe return. My word before God." Standing Bear translated the essence of this exchange to Morning Silence, who had been taught only basic Spanish. She studied the priest's face, the deep lines around his eyes, the genuine distress evident in his expression. "I will go with them," she said in Apache. "But you must stay close." Standing Bear frowned. "We go together, or not at all." She shook her head firmly. "Too many warriors will frighten them. Their fear will become danger." Her gaze held his. "One warrior, you." After a tense negotiation conducted through a mixture of Spanish, hand gestures, and translated Apache, an agreement was reached. Morning Silence and Standing Bear would accompany the whites to their settlement. The other Apache warriors would remain at Broken Rock, where supplies would be sent to them daily as proof of good faith. If Morning Silence and Standing Bear did not return in 7 days, or if the supplies failed to arrive even once, the warriors were to assume treachery and act accordingly. As they departed with the white men, Lone Wolf caught Morning Silence's arm. "Remember who you are," he said, his voice rough with emotion that surprised her. "Remember your people." She nodded once, understanding that his concern was not merely for the band's safety, but for her spirit, afraid she might be reclaimed by the white world that had once discarded her. The settlement of Copper Springs came into view just as dusk was falling, a collection of wooden buildings surrounding a central street with scattered homesteads dotting the nearby hillsides. A tall wooden cross marked the small church at one end of town, while wisps of smoke rose from chimneys against the darkening sky. To Morning Silence, who had never seen structures more permanent than the semi-permanent dwellings of her people, The settlement seemed both imposingly solid and strangely fragile. The streets were eerily empty as they rode in. Normally, Standing Bear knew such a party would attract curious onlookers, especially children. The absence spoke volumes about the severity of the sickness. Father Blackwood led them directly to a long, low building near the church. "Our infirmary," he explained, dismounting. "We've gathered the sickest here for care." Morning. Silence slid from her pony with fluid grace, her medicine bags already in hand. Standing Bear remained close, his body tense with readiness, despite the peaceful reception. The smell hit them first as they entered, the unmistakable scent of sickness, sweat, and approaching death. Oil lamps cast a yellow glow over a room filled with makeshift cots, each occupied by a suffering figure. Some moaned softly, others lay ominously still. A harried-looking woman moved between the patients, her apron stained and her face haggard with exhaustion. "Mrs. Abernathy has been tending them since Dr. Wells fell ill," Father Blackwood explained softly. "She's the midwife." The woman looked up, her expression shifting from exhaustion to surprise and then wary hope as she registered Morning Silence's appearance. "This is the Indian healer?" she asked, her voice cracking with fatigue. "Apache," Standing Bear corrected firmly, "and she is called Morning Silence." Mrs. Abernathy looked momentarily taken aback by Standing Bear's perfect English, then nodded. "Forgive me. I meant no disrespect." She gestured around the room. "As you can see, we're desperate for help. The fever takes them quickly, and the spots, once they appear inside the mouth and throat, we've lost them every time." Morning. Silence had already moved to the nearest cot, where a young girl of perhaps 6 lay covered in angry red pustules. Without asking permission, she placed her palm on the child's forehead, closing her eyes briefly. When she opened them, she turned to Standing Bear. "Ask for clean water, fresh linens, and a fire where I can heat water for medicines." Standing Bear relayed these requests, watching carefully as Father Blackwood instructed Mrs. Abernathy to gather the supplies. Morning Silence, meanwhile, had opened her medicine bags and was arranging various pouches and bundles on a small table. "What is she doing?" Father Blackwood asked, fascination evident in his tone. "She prepares," Standing Bear replied simply, unwilling to explain Morning Silence's methods to outsiders. "Do not disturb her concentration." For the next hour, Morning Silence moved from patient to patient, her hands gentle but sure as she assessed each one. She spoke only to Standing Bear, giving instructions which he translated for the increasingly astonished whites. She sorted the afflicted by severity, indicated which needed immediate attention, and began preparing her medicines. When she finally spoke directly to Mrs. Abernathy, it was in halting but clear English that surprised even Standing Bear, who had not realized how much she had absorbed from his lessons. "This sickness," Morning Silence said, her blue eyes intense in her solemn face, "moves like fire through dry grass. Those not yet sick must stay away. Those caring must wash hands in hot water with pine ash between each person touched." Mrs. Abernathy blinked in surprise, then nodded slowly. "Like Dr. Wells always says, cleanliness prevents spread." Morning Silence continued, her hands already working to crush dried herbs into a fine powder. "I need all windows open. Fresh air fights sickness, and the sick must drink water, much water. Their bodies burn it away." Father Blackwood watched with a mixture of wonder and uncertainty. "Your medicines, they are natural remedies?" Morning Silence met his gaze steadily. "They are what the earth provides to heal its children, all its children." The priest seemed to understand the gentle rebuke in her words. He nodded once and stepped back, allowing her the space to work. As the night deepened, Morning Silence's healing ceremony began in earnest, a blend of Apache wisdom and an innate understanding of the human body that transcended cultural boundaries. Standing Bear stood watch near the door, his hand never far from his knife. Yet as he observed the white settler's desperate gratitude and his daughter's focused determination, he felt the first fragile thread of something unexpected beginning to form, a bridge across a divide he had thought impassable. Dawn broke over Copper Springs, painting the simple wooden buildings in hues of gold and amber. Morning Silence had not slept. Throughout the night, she had moved between the sick with tireless dedication, applying poultices to draw out fever, administering teas brewed from her precious herb supply, and showing Mrs. Abernathy how to create steam tents infused with pine and cedar to ease the labored breathing of those most severely afflicted. Standing Bear had maintained his vigil by the door, refusing offers of a chair or food. Only once had he stepped outside to ensure that supplies had indeed been sent to the warriors waiting at Broken Rock as promised. Satisfied that this part of the agreement had been honored, he returned to his post, watching his daughter work with a mixture of pride and concern. By mid-morning, the first signs of improvement became evident. 2 children who had been delirious with fever now slept peacefully, their breathing more regular. An elderly man who had not been able to swallow water for 2 days now sipped broth from a spoon offered by Mrs. Abernathy. News of the Apache healer's success spread quickly through the small settlement. Anxious relatives gathered outside the infirmary, hoping for word of their loved ones. Others brought sick family members who had been cared for at home, creating a steady stream of new patients requiring attention. Dr. Wells, himself recovering from a milder case of the sickness, arrived shortly before noon. A tall man with a neatly trimmed grey beard and intelligent eyes shadowed by exhaustion, he observed Morning Silence's methods with undisguised fascination. "The poultice you're using," he said, gesturing to the greenish paste she was applying to a young woman's chest. "What does it contain?" Morning Silence glanced up at him, then at Standing Bear, who nodded his permission to share the knowledge. "Yarrow for fever," she explained in her careful English. "Pine resin to draw out sickness, sage to purify, honey to hold together and fight evil spirits in the blood." Dr. Wells raised an eyebrow at the mention of spirits, but nodded thoughtfully. "We've used yarrow in tinctures, but never in this combination." He hesitated, professional curiosity warring with ingrained prejudice. Would you be willing to show me how you prepare it?" A flicker of surprise crossed Morning Silence's face. In the Apache world, healing knowledge was sacred, passed down through careful apprenticeship, yet something in the doctor's sincere interest resonated with her understanding of what a true healer should be. Someone who placed the relief of suffering above all other concerns. "I will show you," she agreed, "so more can be helped." Throughout the day, an unexpected collaboration formed. Dr. Wells contributed his knowledge of anatomy and conventional medicines, while Morning Silence shared techniques refined through generations of Apache wisdom. Mrs. Abernathy moved between them, absorbing both approaches and often finding practical ways to combine them. By evening, 3 of the most critical patients had stabilized enough to take water and broth. No new deaths had occurred, the first such day since the epidemic had begun 2 weeks earlier. Father Blackwood entered the infirmary as the day's light was fading, carrying a tray with simple food: bread, dried beef, and apples. "You must eat to keep up your strength," he insisted, offering the tray first to Morning Silence. She accepted a piece of bread with a small nod of thanks, suddenly aware of her body's exhaustion now that the immediate crisis had passed. "We've prepared quarters for you and your guardian," the priest continued, glancing at Standing Bear. "A small cabin behind the church. It's private and clean." Standing Bear straightened from his position against the wall. "We will sleep here, with the sick." Father Blackwood looked concerned. But surely the young lady needs proper rest. A bed, at least. My daughter is Apache, Standing Bear replied firmly. She needs no special comforts. Morning Silence laid a hand on his arm. Father, she said softly in their language, we should accept their offer. I can do no more tonight. Tomorrow will bring new challenges. After a brief negotiation, it was agreed that they would use the cabin, but only if it was close enough to return quickly to the infirmary if needed. The cabin was simple but comfortable, a single room with 2 narrow beds, a small table, and a stone fireplace. Through the single window, they could see the back of the church, and beyond it, the infirmary. Standing Bear immediately checked every corner, every possible entry point, his warrior's instincts never at rest in this foreign territory. They have treated us with respect so far, Morning Silence observed, sitting on the edge of one bed. For now, Standing Bear replied, his voice low, because they need you. Never forget that need can turn to fear once it is satisfied. She nodded, acknowledging the wisdom in his caution. The sickness is strong, but I believe we can turn its path. Another 2 days, perhaps 3, and the worst will have passed. Standing Bear studied his daughter's face, noting the shadows of fatigue beneath her eyes and the slump of her shoulders. 13 summers had not prepared her for this burden, yet she carried it with a dignity that made his heart swell with pride. You should rest, he said gently. Morning Silence shook her head. First, I must know of our people. The sickness would have spread further by now. Standing Bear's expression grew somber. I will try to send word with the men who bring supplies tomorrow. A soft knock at the door interrupted their conversation. Standing Bear's hand moved to his knife as he approached the door cautiously. Who comes? He called in English. It's Sarah Abernathy, came the reply. I've brought something for Morning Silence. Standing Bear opened the door a few inches, examining the midwife before allowing her entry. She carried a simple dress of blue cotton and a pair of worn but serviceable shoes. I thought you might like a change of clothes, she explained, setting the items on the bed. And she hesitated, pulling a small object from her pocket. This belonged to my daughter. She didn't survive the fever last week. She was about your age. The object was a small silver hairbrush with an intricate flower pattern engraved on its back. Mrs. Abernathy held it out, her eyes bright with unshed tears. She would have wanted someone to use it, someone who helps others. Morning Silence received the gift with both hands, understanding the deep significance of the gesture. I am sorry for your loss, she said softly. Her spirit walks with the ancestors now. Mrs. Abernathy blinked rapidly. Yes, she's with the angels. She touched Morning Silence's hand briefly. What you did today, I don't know if the others understand how many lives you've saved, but I do. After she left, Morning Silence examined the brush, running her fingers over the delicate silver patterns. A gift with meaning, Standing Bear observed, the most powerful kind. She sees me, Morning Silence replied simply, not as white, not as Apache, just as someone who shares her purpose. Standing Bear nodded slowly, recognizing a truth he had not fully considered before. For all his caution about the white world, he had not accounted for this, that his daughter might find recognition of her spirit's purpose among these strangers. As darkness settled fully over the settlement, Morning Silence finally surrendered to exhaustion, falling into a deep sleep, still dressed in her Apache garments, the silver brush clutched in one hand. Standing Bear remained awake, keeping watch from a chair, positioned to view both his daughter and the window that faced the settlement. Outside, a full moon rose over Copper Springs, casting silver light on the infirmary where the sick rested more easily, on the church where Father Blackwood knelt in prayer for healing, and on the cabin where an Apache warrior guarded a girl who belonged to 2 worlds, yet was bound by neither. 4 days passed like water flowing over stones, steady, transformative, and unstoppable. Morning silence worked from dawn until well past dusk, moving between the infirmary and homes throughout the settlement where the sick lay. The blue dress given by Mrs. Abernathy now covered her Apache leggings, a practical compromise that allowed her to move more easily among the white settlers without causing undue alarm. Around her neck, however, Swift Deer's medicine pouch remained, a constant reminder of who she was and where she belonged. Standing Bear observed the subtle changes in his daughter with watchful eyes. Her movements among the whites had gained confidence. Her English flowed more readily, ancient memories of the language somehow surfacing through her interactions. Most concerning to him, the settlers no longer regarded her with suspicion, but with a reverence that bordered on awe. The Apache angel, he had heard one woman whisper as morning silence passed. "Sent by God to save us," another replied. Such talk stirred unease in his warrior's heart. Admiration could transform quickly to possession, and he had not forgotten that the 7 days originally agreed upon would soon end. The sickness was receding. Only 2 new cases had appeared yesterday, and no deaths had occurred since their arrival. But would the whites be willing to let their miracle worker return to her people? On the morning of the 5th day, morning silence found Dr. Wells waiting for her at the infirmary, his face alight with excitement. "I've been experimenting with your methods," he explained, leading her to a small back room that served as his dispensary, combining them with some of our medicines. On a table lay several jars containing variations of her poultices and tinctures, methodically labeled in the doctor's precise handwriting. One jar contained a clear liquid in which plant material had been steeped. "This is your fever tea, but distilled with alcohol to preserve it longer," he explained. "And here," he pointed to a jar of salve, "your drawing poultice, but with the addition of carbolic acid, which our medical journals suggest fights putrefaction." Morning silence examined each preparation with careful attention. "You learn quickly," she observed. The doctor's expression grew serious. "I've been a physician for 23 years. I've studied at medical colleges in Boston and Philadelphia. Yet in 4 days, you've taught me more about treating this particular fever than all my books combined." He hesitated. "I would like to learn more, to truly understand your methods." Morning silence tilted her head slightly, considering his words. "Some knowledge comes not from learning, but from listening. To the plants, to the body's whispers, to the spirits that connect all living things." Dr. Wells frowned slightly at this mention of spirits, his scientific mind resistant to such concepts. Yet he had seen her place her hands on a patient's body and identify problems hidden beneath the skin, as if she could somehow see or sense what others could not. "Perhaps," he suggested carefully, "what you call spirits, we might call natural energies not yet understood by science." A ghost of a smile touched morning silence's lips. "Names are just breath shaped by tongues. The truth they point to remains the same." Their philosophical discussion was interrupted by a commotion outside, raised voices, the clattering of horses' hooves, and the unmistakable sound of men arguing. Standing Bear appeared in the doorway, his face tense with alarm. "Soldiers," he said in Apache, "a patrol has ridden into town." Morning silence felt her heart quicken. Though their presence in Copper Springs had been peaceful, relations between the Apache and the U.S. Army remained hostile. Soldiers represented danger not only to Standing Bear, but potentially to the warriors waiting at Broken Rock. They moved cautiously to the infirmary's front entrance. In the street outside, a group of blue-uniformed cavalry soldiers had dismounted. Their leader, a lieutenant with a sun-reddened face and impatient demeanor, was engaged in heated conversation with Father Blackwood. "Rumors of Apache in the area," they overheard the lieutenant saying. "Settlements north of here reporting missing livestock. Tracks headed this direction." "Lieutenant Marshal," Father Blackwood replied with strained patience, I assure you we've seen no raiding parties. We've been rather preoccupied with an epidemic, as you can plainly see." He gestured toward the infirmary, where several recovering patients sat outside in the morning sun, still covered with fading red pustules. The lieutenant's eyes narrowed as he noticed Morning Silence and Standing Bear in the doorway. His hand moved instinctively toward his sidearm. "What's this? You're harboring Indians in town." Dr. Wells stepped forward quickly. "This young lady is a healer who has saved dozens of lives in our settlement. Her father accompanies her for protection. They are here as honored guests, Lieutenant, not as threats." The soldier's gaze fixed on Morning Silence with obvious confusion. Her Apache dress and bearing contrasted sharply with her blue eyes and lighter skin. "What kind of Indian is she supposed to be?" "I am Apache," Morning Silence stated clearly, meeting his gaze without fear. "I was born to white parents, but raised by the people who saved me when I was abandoned." A ripple of surprise passed through the soldiers who had gathered behind their lieutenant. This was clearly not a story they had encountered before. Lieutenant Marshall's confusion quickly hardened back into suspicion. Regardless of her unusual circumstances, harboring any Apache puts this settlement at risk. There's a war on, in case you've forgotten. General Crook has orders to round up all hostiles. "There's nothing hostile about saving the lives of white children," Mrs. Abernathy interjected, stepping forward from the gathering crowd of townspeople. "My own niece would be dead if not for Morning Silence." Murmurs of agreement rose from the settlers. Many had family members who had recovered under the young healer's care. The lieutenant looked increasingly uncomfortable as he realized the town stood united behind the Apache visitors. "I'll need to report this situation to my commanding officer," he said stiffly. "In the meantime, I strongly advise against allowing them to remain here for your own safety." "With all due respect, Lieutenant," Father Blackwood replied, his voice firm despite his gentle demeanor. "Medical emergencies take precedence over military concerns. Until our epidemic is fully contained, Morning Silence and her father remain under the protection of this community." The standoff might have escalated further had not one of the soldiers suddenly swayed in his saddle, his face alarmingly flushed. "Sir," he mumbled, "I don't feel right." Morning Silence moved forward before anyone could stop her, reaching up to touch the soldier's forehead. "Fever," she announced. "The sickness has found him." Within an hour, 3 more soldiers showed symptoms of the fever. The lieutenant's belligerence dissolved into pragmatic acceptance as Dr. Wells explained that the soldiers would need to be quarantined immediately to prevent spreading the disease to the rest of their patrol. Or worse, back to the fort, where it could devastate the entire garrison. "They can be housed in the church meeting hall," Father Blackwood suggested. "It's separate from the infirmary, but close enough for treatment." Morning Silence worked alongside Dr. Wells to establish this second infirmary, showing the soldiers the same care she had given the settlers. Standing Bear watched with carefully concealed concern, recognizing that these new developments would certainly delay their return to the Apache camp beyond the promised 7 days. As dusk approached, he pulled Morning Silence aside during a rare moment of quiet. "I must send word to our people," he said in low tones. "Lone Wolf's son, the others, they need the medicines you have been making here." Morning Silence nodded, acutely aware of her divided responsibilities. "Ask Father Blackwood to send a rider to Broken Rock with medicines and instructions. The warriors can take them back to our people." "And us?" Standing Bear asked, the question heavy with implications. "The soldiers' arrival changes everything. Even if we tried to leave now, they might follow, or worse, send a larger force to search for our camp." Morning Silence closed her eyes briefly, feeling the weight of the decision before them. When she opened them again, they held the clear certainty he had come to recognize when her healer's instinct guided her. 3 more days, she said. By then, The worst danger will have passed here, and we will have medicines prepared for our people. We leave at dawn on the third day, no matter what new complications arise." Standing Bear studied his daughter's face, still so young yet carrying wisdom that sometimes made him feel like the child in her presence. 3 days, he agreed solemnly. No more. That night, as Copper Springs settled into uneasy sleep, townspeople worried about the lingering epidemic, soldiers concerned about their stricken comrades, and Apache warriors at Broken Rock growing increasingly anxious about their missing healer. Morning Silence stood alone behind the cabin, her face turned toward the distant mountains that sheltered her people. "Guide me," she whispered to the star-filled sky. "Show me how to heal both worlds without tearing myself in two." Only the night wind answered, carrying the scent of sage and pine from the distant hills, a reminder of home that brought both comfort and longing to her divided heart. Dawn of the 6th day brought unsettling news. The rider sent to Broken Rock had returned with word that the Apache warriors were gone, the meeting place abandoned. Only a message remained, carved into the bark of a juniper tree. "The sickness spreads. We have returned to protect our people." Standing Bear received this information with a face carved from stone, but Morning Silence could read the fear behind his eyes. Their absence had stretched beyond the promised time, and now Lone Wolf's warning echoed in her thoughts. "Remember who you are. Remember your people." "We must leave today," Standing Bear declared, already gathering their few possessions. "Our people need us more than ever." Morning Silence nodded, though her heart felt torn. The epidemic in Copper Springs was receding, but not yet defeated. Several critical patients still relied on her care, including 2 of the soldiers who had developed particularly aggressive forms of the fever. "I will prepare extra medicines to leave with Dr. Wells," she said, "enough to guide them through what remains of the sickness." And as they made their preparations, another complication arrived with the morning stage from Tucson. A government Indian agent named Howard Ellsworth sent to investigate reports of Apache encroachment near white settlements. Lieutenant Marshall greeted this reinforcement with poorly concealed satisfaction. "You see, Father Blackwood," the lieutenant said as they gathered in the church office, "this matter extends beyond your settlement's immediate concerns. The Army has a responsibility to maintain order in the territory." Ellsworth, a thin man with spectacles and a perpetually furrowed brow, examined the documents spread before him with bureaucratic precision. "According to our records, all Apache in this region should be confined to the San Carlos Reservation. Any found outside those boundaries are considered hostile. These particular Apache saved our settlement from devastating losses," Dr. Wells countered, his normally reserved demeanor giving way to passionate defense. "Morning Silence has shared healing knowledge that will benefit our community for generations." "Nevertheless," Ellsworth replied, adjusting his spectacles, "regulations are quite clear. They must be escorted to the reservation for their own protection and proper assimilation." Standing Bear, who had remained silent throughout this exchange, now spoke with quiet authority. "We are not yours to place where you wish. We have our own people, our own territory." "Territory ceded by treaty," Lieutenant Marshall interjected. "Treaties made without our consent, by chiefs you selected," Standing Bear replied evenly. The tension in the room thickened like smoke. Father Blackwood attempted to mediate, suggesting a compromise that would allow Morning Silence and Standing Bear to leave peacefully once the epidemic was fully contained. But both the lieutenant and the Indian agent remained firm in their position. "The girl, at least, should remain," Ellsworth declared, studying Morning Silence with clinical interest. "Clearly of white parentage, she should be properly educated and returned to her rightful culture." At these words, Standing Bear moved protectively closer to his daughter, one hand dropping instinctively to the knife at his belt. Lieutenant Marshall noticed the gesture and placed his hand on his holstered revolver. "I belong with my father and my people," Morning Silence stated clearly, breaking the dangerous silence. "I was not lost to be found by you." Before the situation could escalate further, commotion erupted outside, shouts of alarm and the pounding of hooves on the hard-packed earth of the settlement's main street. Father Blackwood moved to the window, his expression shifting from concern to shock. "Apache," he said, "at least a dozen warriors, riding into town." Standing Bear pushed past him to look outside, his body tensing at the sight that greeted him. Leading the approaching warriors was Lone Wolf, his face painted for battle, a rifle held ready across his saddle. "We must stop this before blood is spilled," Morning Silence said urgently. "Let me speak to them." Lieutenant Marshall was already barking orders to his men, directing them to form a defensive perimeter. Settlers scattered from the street, mothers clutching children to their breasts, men reaching for shotguns and rifles kept in homes and shops. Morning Silence slipped through the confusion, moving with the fluid grace that had always been her nature. Standing Bear followed close behind, his presence keeping the lieutenant's men from stopping them. Together, they positioned themselves between the approaching warriors and the hastily assembled line of soldiers. Lone Wolf reined his horse to a halt 20 paces away, his eyes narrowing at the sight of Morning Silence in her mixture of Apache and white clothing. "The 7 days are long past," he called in Apache. "The sickness claims more of our people each day. We come for our healer." Standing Bear moved forward, hands raised in the gesture of peace. "We were preparing to return," he replied in the same language. "These events need not end in bloodshed." Lone Wolf's expression remained hard. "The whites will not release her willingly. I see it in their eyes. They claim what is not theirs to take." His gaze shifted to Morning Silence. "And you, child of two bloods? Have you remembered who you are, or have their comfortable beds and sweet words made you forget your people's suffering?" Morning Silence felt the weight of his accusation like a physical blow. Behind her, she could hear Lieutenant Marshall ordering his men to ready their weapons. Before her, the Apache warriors, men who had watched her grow from abandoned infant to respected healer, waited for her to prove her loyalty. In that moment of crushing pressure, Morning Silence found the still center that always guided her healing work. Without fear, she walked forward until she stood directly between the two forces, her blue eyes meeting Lone Wolf's dark gaze. "I have forgotten nothing," she said in clear, ringing Apache that carried to all her people. "Not the day Standing Bear found me when my white parents left me to die. Not the kindness of our people who accepted a strange child among them. Not the gift the spirits gave me to heal all who suffer." She turned, switching to English that was equally clear for the settlers and soldiers to hear. "Nor have I forgotten that sickness knows no boundaries of skin or language, that all bodies bleed the same, that all mothers weep the same tears when their children suffer." The absolute conviction in her voice held both sides motionless, caught in the power of her presence despite her youth. "There will be no battle here today," she continued, her voice somehow carrying across the dusty street without rising to a shout. "No white blood or Apache blood will stain this ground because of me." She turned back to Lone Wolf. "I will return with you now to heal our people. The whites have learned my methods and have medicines prepared. The worst has passed for them." Then, facing Lieutenant Marshall and Ellsworth, she added, "I go freely of my own choice to the people who are my true family. Any who try to prevent this will answer to powers beyond your understanding." For a moment, no one moved. The tableau held, Apache warriors on one side, white soldiers on the other, and between them a 13-year-old girl whose presence commanded more authority than any uniform or weapon. It was Mrs. Abernathy who broke the silence, stepping forward from the crowd of townspeople who had gathered at a cautious distance. "Let her go," the midwife said, addressing the lieutenant and the Indian agent. "She came to us freely when we needed her most. We owe her the same respect." Dr. Wells joined her, carrying a wooden crate. "I've packed medicines as morning silence instructed and written down everything she taught me." He approached her with the crate, his expression solemn. "Our debt to you can never be fully repaid." More settlers moved forward, parents whose children had been saved, elders who had been pulled back from death's threshold. Their voices joined in support of her departure, creating a chorus that even Lieutenant Marshall could not easily dismiss. Ellsworth, sensing the settlement's unified sentiment, adjusted his approach with political pragmatism. "Perhaps a special dispensation could be arranged," he suggested, "a diplomatic exception given the unusual circumstances." Lieutenant Marshall looked less convinced, but with his own men still recovering under Morning Silence's care and the town firmly opposed to any conflict, his options were limited. "I cannot guarantee your safety if you leave with them," he warned her. "The army has orders regarding all Apache outside the reservation." Morning Silence met his gaze steadily. "And I cannot guarantee your safety if you pursue us. Some protections are not visible to your eyes, Lieutenant." Something in her tone, not a threat but a simple statement of truth, caused the soldier to step back slightly. As the standoff gradually dissolved, Father Blackwood approached Morning Silence with a small leather-bound book. "I had hoped to teach you more about our faith," he said quietly, "but perhaps this will speak where I cannot." He pressed the Bible into her hands. "Your gift comes from somewhere, child. Perhaps someday you'll discover its true source." Morning Silence accepted the book with respectful hands, recognizing it as the sacred text of the white man's spiritual beliefs. "All rivers return to the same ocean," she replied. "All prayers reach the same sky." With supplies distributed and tense farewells exchanged, Morning Silence mounted the pony that had been kept ready for her return journey. Standing Bear rode beside her, his face reflecting quiet pride in her handling of the crisis. As they joined the Apache warriors and prepared to ride out, she turned for one final look at Copper Springs. The settlement seemed smaller somehow, more fragile than when they had arrived. Yet connections had been forged that would not easily break, knowledge shared, lives intertwined, boundaries crossed. For a moment, she caught Mrs. Abernathy's eye, and the two healers exchanged a silent understanding that transcended the conflicts of their peoples. Then, with the certainty of one who knows her true path, Morning Silence turned her face toward the mountains and the people who awaited her healing touch. Behind her, she left not only medicines and knowledge, but seeds of something perhaps even more powerful. The possibility that two worlds might someday find common ground in their shared humanity. 20 years passed like clouds across the vast Arizona sky, sometimes racing with the urgency of summer storms, sometimes drifting with the languid pace of autumn afternoons. The landscape itself had transformed, with the relentless expansion of white settlements reshaping territories once known only to indigenous feet. Railroads now cut across ancient hunting grounds, and cattle ranches sprawled where buffalo had once roamed. Yet, in a secluded valley nestled between two mountain ranges, a remarkable community had taken root and flourished against all odds. Neither fully Apache nor white, it existed in the borderlands of two worlds, governed by principles of healing rather than conquest. At its center stood a woman of 33 summers, her honey-gold hair now streaked with strands of silver that caught the morning light as she worked. Morning Silence moved with the same fluid grace that had always characterized her movements, though experience had added a quiet authority to her bearing. Her blue eyes, still striking against her sun-darkened skin, reflected depths of wisdom earned through years of guiding her people through hardship and change. The healing lodge where she worked had evolved from a simple teepee to a more permanent structure that blended Apache building methods with practical elements borrowed from white architecture. Windows let in abundant light for examining patients, while traditional ventilation techniques kept the air fresh and healing. Shelves lined the walls, holding hundreds of remedies, some purely Apache, others representing the synthesis of knowledge she had developed through years of studying both traditions. Outside, children played in the central clearing of what many now called Harmony Valley, some with the darker coloring of full Apache heritage, others showing the mixed ancestry that had become increasingly common as the community grew. The sound of their laughter drifted through the open door of the healing lodge, bringing a smile to Morning Silence's face as she ground dried herbs with a stone mortar and pestle. "Your thoughts are far away today," observed a familiar voice. Morning Silence looked up to see Standing Bear in the doorway, his once black hair now completely white, his face deeply lined yet still bearing the proud dignity that had always defined him. At 55, he had stepped back from leadership of their band, passing that responsibility to younger men while he served as an elder advisor. "Not far away," she replied, "just moving between times, like shadows passing over the land." He nodded in understanding, entering to sit on a bench near her work table. "You remember this day." She set aside her work, wiping her hands on a cloth. "How could I forget? 20 years ago today, you found a bundle in the dust that no one wanted." Standing Bear's weathered face softened. "The spirits rarely make their purposes clear at first. I found a child abandoned. They found a healer who would build a bridge between worlds." The sound of approaching hoofbeats interrupted their reflection. Morning Silence tilted her head, listening. "Many riders," she observed, "coming from the East Trail." Together they moved outside, watching as a party of 5 riders appeared on the path that wound down into the valley. The lead rider, a woman in a practical riding skirt and jacket, raised her hand in greeting as she recognized the figures waiting below. "Sarah," Morning Silence said, pleasure warming her voice. The years had transformed Sarah Abernathy from the exhausted midwife of Copper Springs to the confident director of the territory's first hospital that employed both white and Apache healing methods. Her once brown hair had faded to gray, but her energy remained undimmed by time. Behind her rode Dr. Wells, now well into his 70s, but still straight-backed in the saddle, and 3 younger people, 2 women and a man who wore the formal attire of government officials. "The commission has finally arrived," Standing Bear noted, his tone neutral but watchful. Morning Silence nodded. 3 years of negotiations, letters and meetings had led to this moment. A formal assessment that would determine whether their healing community would receive official recognition and protection under territorial law. As the visitors dismounted, Morning Silence greeted them with the quiet dignity that had become her hallmark. "Welcome to Harmony Valley," she said. "You come on an auspicious day." Sarah embraced her warmly. "The anniversary. I remembered." Dr. Wells clasped her hand between both of his. 20 years since a young girl taught an old doctor to see medicine with new eyes. The government officials, a stern-faced man named Garrett from the Bureau of Indian Affairs, and 2 women who represented the Territorial Health Commission, maintained a more reserved demeanor, though they offered polite greetings. "We've heard much about your unique establishment," Garrett said, his gaze sweeping the village with barely concealed skepticism. "Though I must say, it appears more orderly than reports suggested." Morning Silence met his gaze evenly. "What did reports suggest, Mr. Garrett?" The man shifted uncomfortably. "Rumors speak of magical healing, pagan rituals, Apache who refuse proper reservation placement." "And what do your eyes tell you now that you are here?" she asked calmly. Before he could respond, one of the female commissioners stepped forward. "I'm Dr. Eleanor Blackwood," she introduced herself. "Father Thomas Blackwood was my uncle. He spoke often of you before his passing." Mourning Silence inclined her head in acknowledgement, remembering the kind priest from Copper Springs who had treated her with such respect during those critical days of the epidemic. He was a man who could see beyond boundaries. "As my colleagues and I hope to do during our visit," Dr. Blackwood replied diplomatically. "We've come with open minds to evaluate your healing methods and community structure." Standing Bear, who had remained watchful throughout these exchanges, now spoke. "Then you will see with honest eyes, not just official papers. Come, we have prepared a place for you to refresh yourselves after your journey. Tonight we will feast, and tomorrow you may begin your official observations." The visitors were led to guest quarters, simple but comfortable structures that, like everything in Harmony Valley, represented the thoughtful blending of traditions. As they settled in, Standing Bear and Mourning Silence returned to the healing lodge to complete preparations for several patients expected from neighboring communities. "They come with judgment already formed," Standing Bear observed quietly. Mourning Silence sorted dried plants with practiced hands. "Some do, others may still be reached." She paused, looking up at the man who had raised her with such unwavering love. "Remember how you once feared I would be reclaimed by the white world?" A rare smile creased his weathered face. "Instead, you helped create something that belongs to neither world alone, but offers healing to both." The journey to this point had not been easy. After their return from Copper Springs 20 years earlier, they had found their Apache band devastated by the sickness. Mourning Silence had worked tirelessly, applying everything she had learned from both traditions to save those still fighting for life. Many had been lost, including Swift Deer, and, most painfully, Lone Wolf, who had died protecting their temporary camp from a cavalry patrol that stumbled upon it. In the aftermath, with their numbers reduced and traditional territories increasingly threatened, Mourning Silence had proposed a radical solution, establishing a permanent healing community that would serve all who came in peace, regardless of origin. Standing Bear had supported her vision, recognizing that adaptation might offer their best hope for survival in a changing world. The first years had been precarious. They survived through a combination of careful diplomacy, strategic alliances with sympathetic whites like Dr. Wells and Sarah Abernathy, and Mourning Silence's growing reputation as a healer whose remarkable abilities transcended cultural boundaries. Gradually, their isolated valley became known as a place where both Apache and settlers could receive care unavailable elsewhere. Now, 20 years later, Harmony Valley had grown into a thriving community of nearly 200 souls, predominantly Apache, but including whites who had chosen to learn their ways, mixed heritage families seeking acceptance, and a steady stream of patients from throughout the territory. That evening, as twilight painted the surrounding mountains in shades of purple and gold, the community gathered for the feast Standing Bear had promised their visitors. Long tables had been set up in the central clearing, laden with traditional Apache dishes, alongside foods that would be familiar to their white guests. Mourning Silence sat between Standing Bear and Sarah Abernathy, observing the careful interactions between the commissioners and the valley's residents. Dr. Soon Blackwood seemed genuinely interested, asking thoughtful questions about healing practices and community governance. The other woman commissioner, a nurse named Margaret Hollister, took notes constantly, her expression revealing nothing of her thoughts. Garrett remained the most reserved, though Mourning Silence noticed his surprise when Riversong, now a respected elder herself, conversed with him fluently in both Spanish and English about territorial politics. They expected savages, Sarah murmured beside her. They found educators, healers, and philosophers instead. Morning Silence nodded slightly. Yet their report will determine our future. If they deny us protected status, they won't, Sarah said with quiet conviction. Dr. Wells and I have too much influence in territorial medical circles now, and Dr. Blackwood's family has the governor's ear. As the meal concluded, Standing Bear rose to address the gathering. Though his role as chief had passed to younger hands, on ceremonial occasions he still spoke for the community as its founding elder. 20 years ago today, he began, his voice strong despite his advancing years, I found a child abandoned in the desert. The white settlers who left her believed she was cursed because she did not cry. The Apache who accepted her discovered she was blessed with a healer's gift that knew no boundaries of blood or language. All eyes turned to Morning Silence, who remained seated, her expression serene despite being the center of attention. That child grew into the woman you know as Morning Silence, Standing Bear continued. Through her vision, this valley became a place of healing for all who come in peace, neither fully Apache nor white, but something new, like the child herself. He gestured toward the visitors. You have come to judge whether our way deserves to continue. You will examine our methods, count our successes and failures, write reports for those who have never set foot on our land. We do not fear your judgment, for we know the truth of our work is written not in government papers, but in the bodies of those we have healed and the community we have built. After the formal speeches concluded, as people gathered in smaller groups around fire pits to share stories and music, Morning Silence slipped away to a familiar ridge overlooking the valley. This quiet spot had been her refuge throughout the years, a place where she could find the stillness that had always been her strength. The sound of footsteps behind her announced Sarah's approach. The older woman settled beside her on a flat rock, both of them gazing out at the valley below, where lanterns and fires created a constellation of warm light against the gathering darkness. I never thought I'd live to see this day, Sarah said after a comfortable silence. When you rode away from Copper Springs with the Apache warriors, I feared we'd never meet again. Morning Silence smiled faintly. And I never imagined you would become my strongest ally among the whites. Not the only one, Sarah reminded her. Dr. Wells sacrificed a prestigious position in Tucson to support your methods, and there are others now, doctors and nurses throughout the territory who have learned to respect both traditions. Because you showed them it was possible, Morning Silence acknowledged. Your hospital in Tucson has done as much to bridge our worlds as anything we've built here. Sarah shook her head. We merely followed the path you blazed. She hesitated, then asked the question that had clearly been on her mind. Have you ever wondered about them? Your birth parents? Morning. Silence was quiet for a long moment. Sometimes, she admitted, not to find them or to understand why they abandoned me, but to tell them that what they saw as a curse became a blessing, that their unwanted child found purpose. And family, Sarah added gently. Standing Bear loves you as fiercely as any father I've ever known. More so, Morning Silence agreed. He taught me that family is not about blood, but about who stays when the storm comes. She turned to face her old friend fully. What do you truly think our chances are with this commission? Sarah's expression grew serious. Honestly, better than they would have been even 5 years ago. The territorial government is gradually accepting that some indigenous ways must be preserved, especially in medicine. Your success rates speak for themselves. Your treatments save lives that conventional white medicine alone cannot. And yet Mr. Garrett looks at us and sees only savages playing at civilization, Morning Silence observed without bitterness. Men like Garrett are becoming the minority, Sarah assured her. The world is changing, Morning Silence. Slowly, painfully, but changing nonetheless. The next 3 days passed in a whirlwind of demonstrations, interviews, and observations. Morning Silence showed the commissioners her methods for treating everything from arrow wounds to childbirth complications. Dr. Wells presented detailed records documenting recovery rates that exceeded those of conventional hospitals. Patients who had traveled from as far as California and New Mexico testified to miraculous recoveries when white doctors had given up hope. On the final evening of their visit, as Morning Silence changed the dressing on a young Apache boy's broken arm, Dr. Blackwood joined her in the healing lodge. "Your technique with that splint," she observed, "combines the Apache knowledge of which woods flex properly with modern understanding of bone alignment." Morning Silence nodded. "Two kinds of wisdom, stronger together than either alone." Dr. Blackwood watched her work in silence for several minutes. Then, with careful deliberation, she said, "The Commission will recommend protected status for Harmony Valley, a formal designation as a territorial healing sanctuary with legal recognition of your medical authority." Morning Silence's hands paused momentarily, then continued their gentle work. "Mr. Garrett agreed to this?" "He was outvoted," Dr. Blackwood replied with a small smile, "though I believe even he was impressed by what he's seen here, despite his reluctance to admit it. This protection, what will it mean for our people? Your land will be legally recognized as belonging to the community. No forced relocations, no military interference. Your healing methods will be officially acknowledged as legitimate medical practice within territorial boundaries." Dr. Blackwood hesitated. "It's not perfect. There will still be those who oppose what you represent. But it's a beginning." That night, after the commissioners had retired to their quarters to prepare for tomorrow's departure, Morning Silence sought out Standing Bear. She found him at his favorite spot near the edge of camp, where the view of the stars was clearest. "Dr. Blackwood told me their decision," she said, sitting beside him on the ground. He nodded. Riversong overheard them discussing the final report. "It seems our future is secured, at least on paper." "Papers burn," Morning Silence observed. "True security comes from what we've built here, something that lives in people's hearts, not government documents." Standing Bear gazed up at the vast expanse of stars. "When I found you that day, I thought I was saving one small life. I never imagined you would one day save our entire way of life." "Not save," she corrected gently. "Transform. What we've created here is not the old way preserved in amber. It's something new, born from both worlds. Like you," he said with quiet pride. Morning Silence reached for his weathered hand, holding it in both of hers. "The day you found me was the day I found my true father. Everything that followed, every life saved, every bridge built, began with that moment of compassion." As dawn broke the following morning, the commissioners prepared to depart. Formal documents had been signed, hands shaken, and promises made. The visitors mounted their horses, ready to carry news of Harmony Valley back to the territorial capital. Morning Silence stood with Standing Bear and the rest of the community to bid them farewell. As Dr. Blackwood turned her horse to go, she paused for one final question. "There's something I've always wondered," she said. "Why did they name you Morning Silence? Your father never explained." Morning Silence glanced at Standing Bear, then back to the commissioner. "Because when he found me, I had never cried, not from birth, not from hunger, not from the sun's heat. I was silent. But when he lifted me from the ground, I found my voice for the first time." A smile touched her lips. "The morning brought me silence, and silence brought me to him." Dr. Blackwood nodded, clearly moved by this simple explanation. "Some would call that providence," she said. "Others, destiny. "I call it healing," Morning Silence replied simply. "The first of many." As the riders disappeared over the eastern ridge, Standing Bear placed his hand on his daughter's shoulder. Together they turned back toward the village that had grown from a desperate vision into a living testament to the possibility of harmony between worlds once thought irreconcilable. The child who had never cried until she found her true father had grown into a woman whose quiet strength had created ripples of change throughout the territory. The abandoned infant had become a healer who refused to abandon anyone in need, regardless of origin. The Morning Silence had transformed into a voice that spoke across the boundaries of race and culture, teaching that the medicine of compassion might be the most powerful healing of all. And in the heart of the Arizona territory, a small valley continued to flourish, not as an Apache stronghold nor as a white settlement, but as something entirely new. A community defined not by blood or language or history, but by the simple, revolutionary belief that all suffering deserved relief, all bodies deserved care, and all people, regardless of origin, deserved to be seen for who they truly were.